So today what we're going to look at is aliases, otherwise known as hotkeys. So these are kind of the shortcuts that you can use to create to like enter commands rather than having to type out the whole command prompt, or even worse, kind of going to these side menus and doing it visually. So this is like an efficiency, time saving tutorial, and definitely primarily oriented towards 2D work, so drafting with Rhino. We have a whole nother kind of set of commands that will be more useful for 3D, but today I'm gonna cover the ones that are that I most frequently use for 2D. So to start, we're going to kind of get to that to the alias menu. The way I do this, I type units. Anytime that I want to get to the document properties page, I type units because it's a short word. It's easy for me to remember. I am often kind of tweaking, you know, um, things in here, and rather than having to kind of menu dive for that, it's just faster to type something in. We have aliases here. Basically, this shows the aliases that are currently kind of associated with this Rhino file. This is a mixture of ones that are preset or default in Rhino, as well as ones that I have put in myself. Not universally, but generally the ones that are in all caps are the ones that I've put in that I really regularly use. But you'll notice there's a bit of a mixture where, like, some of the commands that I most frequently use, like delete or copy, I've kept the same. They're the intuitive C and D, and I think for a lot of commands, for particularly those two, but for some of these, it is still helpful to like have to keep the commands consistent with default when possible, because you don't want to assign D to be, you don't want, when someone clicks the M button, that it deletes, just if you have like other people using your computer, or if you're kind of jumping on someone else's computer. So it's helpful when possible to kind of match these closely. I will say the way that I personally have laid this out is that most of the commands, certainly the ones that I'm regularly using, are accessible. They're on the left side of the keyboard. There, I can type them without taking my right hand off the mouse, which seems small, but when you're doing a command again and again and again, it actually does save some time. There also, you'll notice, are kind of somewhat intuitive, or at least for me, relationships between certain commands. So for instance, let's look at group and ungroup. Down here, it's GR and RG, so kind of the opposite. And that just makes it easy for me to remember. Another kind of weird one you'll notice is move. So I have two commands for move. I have the typical default M, just because there are other people sometimes using my keyboard, and sometimes I already do have my hands off the keyboard, so I'll type move, but I would say, or type M, but I would say 99% of the time I'm using the W, the kind of upside down M, because it's very easily accessible by the left hand. To modify these, super easy. You basically just click into either of these bars. Capitalized versus uncapitalized doesn't matter, but you do have to be very precise about how you type out the name of the command. But you'll notice you can also have kind of the subcommands if they are entered with a underscore. So for instance, if I wanted to, we could have that copy FSU kind of subcommand in copy. I don't in this case, but you have a lot of kind of flexibility with these. You can also import someone else's list if you want, add new commands all together, just by kind of following generally an actual command will be listed or noted with a exclamation mark. And these kind of, I don't know, apostrophe or quotation marks are used for more like setting things, so like toggling on or off ortho mode. But yeah, I'm gonna be referring to this, but just for ease, I will right now. I took a screenshot of it and highlighted the important ones, and I will bring that up into my file with the picture command, which is not one I'm using all the time, so I don't have a hotkey for that. But just kind of bringing this generally into the area we're working so we can keep track of things. You'll notice here I have lines for each of my line types in my or my layers in my layer menu, as well as the the north arrow and an example of text. I also just, for the purposes of this, drew a dumb little 10 by 10 building so that I can show you some of these commands in action. But yeah, jumping right in. The first one you'll notice highlighted here is copy. This is a great tool for 2D, one of the most used for me. Also applicable in 3D, but here we'll look at the 2D application. So in its kind of simplest and least precise way this can be used, you select the object or objects you want to copy. You do the C or full copy command. You click the basic starting point, and then because I'm in ortho mode, it's kind of locked to the north-south, but this can be kind of placed, anywhere in a not precise way if you so desire. We can bring this here. It will continue kind of duplicating each time you click the mouse, so you don't have to kind of re-enter that command if you're doing something multiple times. And like any other command, the way to kind of get out of it is either to hit escape or the right mouse button. So that's it in a kind of basic, not precise way, but there are ways of using this more precisely. One, I think, good way of doing that is you start with your reference point here because I'm in ortho mode. I'm just kind of generally, have the mouse and the cursor on the right side because that's the direction I'm going to want to move it. And then I will just type in a distance. So let's do 25 feet. And so now, after hitting enter, basically in any kind of direction I go, it's locked to a 25-foot increment between our initial point we clicked and the same kind of reference point on the copied object. That's great. But say, maybe this isn't actually a building and this is kind of the profile of a column, and we need to create multiples. Or say this is a building and it's just there's a bunch of these buildings in a row. It's not just one and this. Of course, we could select the object and basically do the command and then copy to the same point on the next object and just do that again and again. These will be the kind of same spacing, the geometry of this object and this object and this object are all the same, great. But actually a way of doing that and saving time is the FUS or FSU command. I forget which order it is, but we'll see it in a moment. But basically we copy, we come down, we're going to do that same 25 feet, but in the down direction. I click that, and then you'll notice we have it kind of brings up this this additional kind of these sub options. So we're going to do FUS, and so that means it's going to make another copy from the last point. This, when I hit F, will toggle to yes. It's going to use the last distance, and it will use the last direction. And so when I do this, when I go F, enter, U, enter, S, enter, what that means is now kind of we can make as many duplicates as we want that are all kind of arrayed across in the same kind of increments, both angular as well as distance-wise. And so that's like a really, really powerful tool to not be kind of under, not to not be slept on. This is really helpful for making stairs. It has a lot of applications in 3D as well. You can kind of be making those duplications in multiple axes. Like this can go across and up. It's great. So that's a really great one I'm using all the time. Okay, next, delete. Pretty self-explanatory. It deletes what you select. And one thing to note with this is that, you know, this is a closed curve, or it's just like you know, even if this is not a closed curve, but it's, you know, a polyline with multiple segments. Basically, if you click anywhere on this, it's selecting the entire object. These are each kind of these are each connected lines, meaning I couldn't delete a individual section of this without kind of doing something to it. We have a couple options for that. One would be Control Shift together. Basically allows you to kind of go in and individually select a segment, which I could then delete. Another option would be to explode and then individually delete those sections, you know, if you kind of selectively want to do it. But yeah, delete, you know, self-explanatory, but using that all the time. Similarly, good for 3D, good for 2D, but yeah, okay, this next one, distance. So distance is another everyday type of tool. What distance does is it tells you the dimension of a line or a 3D object, whatever you want, but without kind of, you know, leaving the like an actual dimension marker as a key. It's just kind of it will measure something and give you the length in the command prompt. So this is kind of a tool. It's kind of a back of the house tool I'm using all the time just to kind of make sure things are square. My model is being modeled cleanly. My drawing is being drawn cleanly. So for me, it's DS, and then I just basically go point to point. 10 feet, great. Oh, that's what I wanted. Nice. How about this side? Same deal. So it just tells you the distance up in the command prompt. The distance noted will be according to the units that you've set for your file. So that is a little, you know, we cover this in another video, but that's kind of why I like doing the feet and inches, because, you know, for what that means is for distances larger than a foot, it will give you it in feet, and for distances smaller than a foot, it's giving you it in inches. It's kind of the best of both worlds, at least in Imperial living. Okay, next one, extend. These are all powerful tools, but the way you would use this one, so just going to draw some polylines, and great. Okay, you know, we have these polylines. Say we want this one to be, I'm moving this to be at the midpoint. Maybe this is at the midpoint. It doesn't really matter where these are, but I don't know, just to give a little bit of logic to our made-up project. Say we want to extend this line to touch this line. You know, one way of doing that would be to kind of grab both ends and scale it in that direction, scale it in this direction, or kind of draw a line across. But basically what extend does is you select the object that you want to extend to, and then you select the object or the line that is being extended. So E, I'll click this and it will run across, and actually just draw another line. For this one, so again, I'm going to select the object I want to extend to. Here, I'm going to move this because it's kind of, it's centered over the gumball. Yeah, and so the way this functions, so I'm selecting the line, the line or the thing I want to extend to, and then I do the command and it extends to that. Self-explanatory. The one thing that's a little funky about it is that, you know, in this case, we were, maybe this is some flooring pattern. This is kind of the interior of the wall cavity. We want to be careful of what object we're kind of initially selecting as the endpoint. So we wouldn't want to extend to here because then it would be going through the wall cavity. We're going to that kind of inner wall in this case. Another thing with it is that for geometries like this where there's kind of a selected line on both sides, it will extend the second object to whatever kind of portion of it you're closer to. So here, because I'm on the kind of the right side of this line segment, it will extend this to meet the one on this side. And if I move over here, it's that way. So boom, boom. Great tool. Okay, next one, match layer. Another great tool. What this does, and this basically allows you to easily change the layer association of different lines or objects in your model. This tool is the reason that I have people draw out lines that are saved into their template save as file. So to show you how this would work, okay, say we want to take this line and we want to turn that into a, I don't know, a hidden line, because actually this doesn't represent something that's on the floor. This line and this line both represent some, I don't know, some beam or something below the project. Of course, one way to do this would be to select it, go over to the properties menu and change the setting via dropdown. But that kind of thing takes time when you know, pretend this is a much bigger, more complex model. You have to kind of zoom in, zoom out. So the way of more quickly doing this is with the match layer command. I have it, you know, aliased as EF. So I type EF, match layer. I have the layers I want to switch selected initially, and then I simply click on the layer I want it to be turned into. You know, at the start, that's why these are helpful. But of course, like as your drawing starts to get a lot more populated with more line work, you can kind of make that selection from a line that's closer to the line that you're changing. So say I wanted to also turn this into a hidden line, I wouldn't necessarily go all the way over here. I would just relate it to the line that's closer. That's a great tool. Works in 3D, 2D, awesome. Okay, next one is show. This is a command that is kind of paired with another command. For some people, they use the hide command, which I don't have a hotkey for because I don't use it that frequently. It basically just hides whatever you have selected. I think the funkiness with it a little bit is that sometimes as your geometries get more complex, you can kind of forget what you've actually hidden. So say I wanted to, you know, really get this, the specificity of this, what I've called a beam, you know, kind of more precise, rather than doing it that way. So actually to show you the command, I have it as ET, show, and it basically unhides it. I think there is a separate unhide command, but show is what I use. But rather than hide, the command that I use that's kind of paired with the show is isolate. So isolate, what it does, you select the objects that you want to basically keep looking at, and in my case I have TE, so the opposite of that show command, and then it basically allows you to just see the objects that you have selected, so you can kind of work on them with, you know, less of the other kind of noise of the project happening. And so, or I just isolated again. So basically show just like reveals everything again. I think if you are using the hide command, like show is something that like you occasionally want to just just do. If you're just modeling, or if you're drawing, I'll occasionally just like type show. There's a few other commands like this that I kind of will occasionally just do as kind of hygiene, to make sure I'm not missing anything. But then, I'm not that regularly hiding stuff, so it's not as important for me, but whatever. Okay, next command is fillet. So fillet in its kind of most basic form, what it does is, the way I use fillet is a little bit different than I think it was originally intended. So fillet, basically, it takes two lines and puts a curve, connects them with a curve. So I think the default is usually a radius of like a foot or something. Sorry, I actually have to select, or wait, here we go, fillet. So let's say R 1 foot. This is just to show you how, like, it's often used. So it gives you this kind of arc that connects two different lines, which has utility, of course, but the reason this is a command I use every single day is that the way I use this is I will do fillet and my radius is normally set to 0. And what that means is that it will exactly kind of connect to two lines. So in the case of this, say I wanted to turn this into a right angle. I wanted to get rid of this portion on the top and this portion on the side and have this kind of do a turn. One way of doing that would be, selecting this and trimming, which we'll talk about in a second, or perhaps splitting this object in accordance with this object and deleting the top. But all of those kind of require multiple steps. What's great about fillet is it's one single step. F, or at least when the radius is 0. F, boom, boom, done. So just, it's that speed factor. I will say be careful with fillet if you're using it. If you're using it for just the right angle thing, if there are times when that's definitely one to check on when you get your template going and as you're starting a model, because sometimes there can be a small radius set as default, and so all of these lines that you think you're kind of squaring off have a little arc in them, which is something to, you want to notice that kind of stuff early before it goes everywhere in the project. Offset, FS for me, another super powerful tool. I'm just going to draw a line just so I can do this demo more easily. So I'm going to do this -5 feet. Okay, so offset can work a couple of different ways. It basically, so I'm going to select this, FS, and there's a lot of different options for this. I would say the ones that I most frequently use for this, I will do offset, just the basic offset command, and then I will either do T, which is through a point, or I will do D, which is by a specified distance. So first, let me show you D. So we would just literally hit D, and then we would enter, say we want it to be offset by 3 feet for some kind of, landscape feature surrounding the project. You would, type that in, I hit enter, and now basically it's locked at 3 feet. It doesn't, that can be either extended to the outside, but if I bring my cursor to the other side, that extends to the inside. But in this case, I want it to be on the outside because it's, as I said, a landscape thing. So that's super useful. That's a good way of, creating wall thickness for a building that the thickness of. The other tool is this T, so that's to a specific point. So FS, enter, and I will go through point, and that basically allows it to be snapped to some other point in your drawing. So say this was not just a line, but this was another building, you can kind of bring it across and then precisely match or align it with some other geometry. Offset's great. Next tool, group, ungroup. This is pretty self-explanatory or somewhat self-explanatory. So let's say that like I am very frequently, you know, say there's a bunch of other things in this. So circle, and we have another one here. I don't exactly know what we're drawing here, but pretend we want to be able to easily kind of select or modify different components of these two whatever systems or patterns. We can, rather than having to each time we want to like change a line weight or do something to them, we have to kind of go through and individually click everything. If these were grouped, then if I click at any part of the whole, it will select the whole group. Whereas these are not grouped, so we're going to select them all, and then we'll group them. Then that means that anytime I want to select all of these, I just have to click on one. And ungroup is naturally the opposite of that. This is, you have to be a little bit careful with like organization here where, say we just want to move this ball and not the other ones. If we click this, we can sometimes accidentally move all three in an unintended way. A way to kind of trick around that rather than clicking on it and ungrouping it, moving it, and then grouping it again, is that you can hold control. So just to show you guys, these are grouped. If I unselect it and I hold Command Shift, I can move. Oh, there we go. I hold Command Shift, click, select the object, and then can move with the gumball. These are still part of the same group. So I'm going to do that again. Select it, then release, and then I can kind of move this around or do other transformations to this while it's still part of the same group. This is useful once you kind of get into more complex things, or if you're working on, say, a pattern that replicates that you need to kind of like duplicate across, because you can easily duplicate like the whole system. But I would say a lot of this hygiene is, if this is, you wouldn't want to be grouping, say, furniture. That's something that would more, you would kind of control that and deal with that in as a layer, which you can still, for layers, you still have the ability to like turn them off or turn them on as a group. But I still do use group and ungroup a good amount. I'm going to ungroup all of this just for what's coming next. Talked about that. Scale 1D is one I frequently use for 2D drawings, full-on scale as well. But scale 1D basically allows you select the object you want to scale, you do scale, which for me is just S, then you click the kind of fixed starting point and then the fixed end point, which in this case, I had as the end of the line, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But then you just kind of bring it up, because I'm in ortho mode. I can kind of come across here. It just extends it. I will say, usually better to scale 1D is a little bit of a rougher tool. You can still kind of scale by precise dimensions. So say I want this, I click one end, I click the other end. I can type in an amount, so I could go 5 feet, and then it will bring it down to that length. So that's, I think, the more precise way of using it. Though I will say it can potentially lead to issues where, okay, say we try to select the end down here, but we have, say, near on, and we think we've hit the end, but we're actually not exactly at the end. And then we go up, and basically it will change kind of angular thing. It can get funky quickly. And that might be a subtle enough difference that you're not kind of picking up on it. So generally, I think it's a little bit more precise to be using the extend, trim, fillet, those kind of tools. But this is a really big reason why I basically never have near on. I always have it untoggled, unless there's something really, really specific that I need to be doing. But yeah. Okay. Next tool, split. And we'll talk about split and trim together because they are somewhat similar. Trim, you start with the line that you're trimming with. So I like to think of you start with the blade, and then you select the portion that you want of the line that you want to get rid of. So I go TR, so I've started with the blade, and then I'm going to get rid of that. So say I want to get rid of this thing, I would start with, start with the blade, and I'd get rid of that. You can also kind of select multiple lines and do this at the same time. So I've selected multiple blades, if you like that analogy, and then I can kind of, get rid of other lines in accordance with that. Split, what split does is it's kind of the opposite direction. So you start with the object that you want to be cut, and then you select the blade second. And each of them kind of has uses. What's nice about the split command is you retain the other end of it. So if you actually do just want to only have this box and you don't want any of these other lines, trim would probably be a better tool, where you could just like select all of this and go boom, 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 done. But say what you actually wanted to do, you want this line and this line to be shifted down. You'd select these two lines, you do split, and then you could move these separately. So they have kind of different uses, but are somewhat similar. Next, we talked about isolate. Next one we'll talk about is top, which I have as TT. So what's great about top, this is one of my most used commands, as crazy as that sounds. Top is just a shortcut for getting you into the top view, the exactly, far away overhead. And this is helpful, yes, in 2D, but really helpful when you're moving between 2D and 3D. So say, we'll really cover this in a later thing, but say we want to like turn this into a 3D object, and so I orbit around with Shift and Control and the right click, and I get into this, it still says top, but it really is kind of like a perspective view. And project is, I have to turn off to be able to move these in the Z-axis. Say I extend this up, extrude curve, and bring it up by 10 feet. So I'm in kind of a weird display setting right now, but what T would do is, it goes from this orbit command. If we want to say, hey, we want to get back into drafting, or we want to okay, we've made this thing, great, that's over there, but now we want to keep drafting and keep drawing on this thing. The way to get back to the top view would not be to kind of go above it like this and get close, because you'll notice, we're not in a purely multi-view orthographic view. The angle is slightly off. The way to do that with absolute precision and certainty is to do the top command. So here you'll notice this almost looks like a 2D drawing, even though it's a closed extrusion, a 3D object, just because we are so perfectly over the top of it. So I'm using top all the time, particularly as I'm kind of navigating between views or orbiting. Next one, V polyline. This is, I've used this command a bunch to just create even the geometry that we have here. But this is another one of my most used commands. So it basically makes a line. I like polyline rather than line. So line is also a command that I don't have as a hotkey, but line makes just one section of a line, which is how I'm using polyline most of the time. But I will say the advantage is that like you don't have to like re-enter the command. You can still have polyline function as the line tool by just clicking and then hitting, clicking, ending your segment, and then right clicking. So say I wanted, a line coming across like this, come across, and it's, if I was to click again, it would create another, another line segment at this other strange location. But if I just want to make this one, I click the first point, click the second point, and then I just right click to get out of it. This can also be done with precision by, say, clicking a starting point and then just typing in the value of the length. So 10 feet, say. And now, because we're in ortho mode, I'm holding shift, so we're out of it, but it's locked into that 10-foot increment. And great, now we have a 10-foot line. The one advantage in my eyes of the line segment alone, I'm kind of showing you guys a 3D thing. The one single advantage that I regularly hit with the line over the polyline command is with line, you have a you have other sub options of like how it's formed. The one I use the most frequently is to say we were 2D, but now I want to like bring elements of this up. I can click a starting point and see it wants to be on this XY axis, but if I type V, enter, So, so if I go V, I see what's happening, sorry. Line V, you'll notice, is basically sending that line perfectly in the Z-axis, and I can do that by also a specified dimension. So that's really like the only use case for me of line versus polyline, but not to be ignored. If you have, say, a building that you have to basically create a bunch of vertical elements, there are times where I find myself doing line in the V command. I'm going TT top to get back into this view. And I'm going to turn project back on. Okay, last few here. Move, W, pretty self-explanatory. But so say, we actually want this to be on the edge of this kind of patio thing that we've drawn. W or M. Will basically bring it across. I will say this is one to really be careful to use with precision. So yes, we could kind of move this any which way, but I really would encourage you guys to only move when you have basically a specific reference point that you can click to, or if you're manually entering the distance that you want it to travel. So say here I want to move this, let's just say 2.5 feet, moving it that way versus just kind of dragging it. Another kind of really useful thing is when you have the gumball toggled on. I use the gumball as much or more than the move command because it basically allows you to just, if you're working kind of rectilinearly, it allows you to just, allows you to do that very directly. So 2.5 feet and then enter. Or I can go north, 2.5 feet. Or, you could rotate it 90 degrees. So yeah, a little bit of crossover with the gumball tool if you're using that, but still useful. Okay, last one here, at least in the 2D portion. So for this one, this is ZSA, so this is zoom all selected. So this is one where it's kind of hitting a couple of these like sub-menu options, but this is one that's great. So say, you know, we have, I'm going to copy this 25 feet, boom, and then I'll FUS a bunch of these, and then say, I'm just trying to show you, so copy, boom, FUS, boom, boom. Say we have like a more complex project, a bunch of things happening, and these are different options that are maybe each a little different. And I want to quickly just be looking at this one. Yes, we can kind of scroll in and then kind of get it centered over the option that you're looking at. But what's really cool is the ZSA command. So if I select the thing, ZSA, it just brings you there, and it centers it exactly over your kind of model space. It's fast, and you know that can be, doesn't have to be the whole object, like that can be over, it's whatever you have selected. It could be 4 of these, you know. It just is a very fast way of navigating around the page. It will also have utility for down the line when we talk about paper space and making layouts. There is kind of a key step to that involves zoom selected. So definitely, you know, start to get familiar with that one. But yeah, you know, those are the main ones that I am using all the time. I think the only other things worth noting, I have a couple other on here that are worth mentioning at least, that I don't have as hotkeys, or aliases, but I regularly use. One of them is cell dupe. So let's copy this. Pretend I'm going to copy this in place. So now, you know, there are 2 sets of identical line work on top of one another here, which, you know, sometimes doing that is, sometimes you have a good reason to do that, but basically, or say we're drawing something and we accidentally make an extra line somewhere. Cell dupe, similar to kind of occasionally hitting show, is one of these tools that I will occasionally use to just, for kind of good drawing or modeling hygiene. So cell dupe, I am typing out the full thing. Basically, it tells you what's a duplicate, what's exactly a duplicate. So this was the one we copied on top of itself. So I will just cell dupe, and then I'll delete. And now if I cell dupe, no duplicates were found. And this is great because, you know, if we're kind of making a drawing of this, having duplicate line weights over, or lines over one another, really messes with your line weights. It also just like leads to a lot of other potential problems. So it's a good way of just kind of occasionally making sure you know where everything is. Another big one we'll talk about when we kind of get into how Rhino interfaces with, how 2D Rhino interfaces with 3D Rhino is a kind of critical command is make 2D, but that one will be covered kind of on its own, in its own video. The final one I'll say is curves. I would say curves are the one kind of drawing or line component that I don't really use hotkeys for. The reason for that is that the way that curves are produced are, you know, is really kind of different and specific to what you're trying to get. And personally, I find it more intuitive. Like, I don't use curves that often, but when I do, I find it more intuitive to kind of have the little symbols that is kind of explaining how each geometry is formed. So usually I will have this kind of curve menu on the left when I do have to use curves. But yeah, that's really the one that I'm not super frequently using hotkeys for. But yeah, that's my list, you guys. I'll like hang on here again just so you can see it. But yeah, I really encourage you guys to like test some of these out and you know, modify or incorporate them into your Rhino drafting as desired. Thanks.